It's crazy that it's been, at the time of when this movie came out, it had been pretty much 30 years since since the release of the second film, which is wild. The fact that it had been in development hell for such a long time. It's crazy now that you're getting a third film after a failure reboot. So, I guess that's what it takes, folks. I think that's what it takes to get a third film these days.
It has a gunner seat?
Ghostbusters-Afterlife is directed by Jason Reitman, son of Ivan Reitman, who was the original director of the first two Ghostbusters films, and is written by Gil King and Jason Reitman. The film stars Carrie, Coon, Finn Wolfhard, Mckenna, and Paul Rudd. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, when a single mom and her two kids arrive in a small town, they begin to discover their connection to the original Ghostbusters and the secret legacy their grandfather left behind. After the commercial failure of 2016's Ghostbusters, Columbia canceled all plans for any sequels to that movie. They wanted to sever fucking ties with that shit. And so with that, they decided to go back to the original films to continue on, which would be the third film. And it's funny because a third movie for the original Ghostbusters was planned for decades. It had been there since like after the second movie they've been talking about it, but the biggest problem was Bill Murray not wanting to do it and having a feud with Harold Ramis for a long time until his tragic death. And so now they are planning to do a third movie, which is kind of weird to think that they're making a third film without one of the other members of the Ghostbusters. So I guess that's what it is nowadays. I saw Afterlife and reviewed it on my Instagram back in 2021 when the movie was out. I had not reviewed the original films, so those were the first time you guys were getting my reviews for those. This will be a second doing of it, although it won't be as different. But if you want to see the original review, it's up on my Instagram. Go check it out. When it was out, I enjoyed the film. I really did. I had a fun time. I thought it was an enjoyable Ghostbusters film through and through. And now having rewatched the film in preparation for Frozen Empire, I still enjoy it. I still think it is a very enjoyable Ghostbusters film, even though it doesn't take much to beat Ghostbusters 2, okay? As much as though it's not a flawless film, because it's not, I do think that it's a step in the right direction. I really think that if they're going down this road, then it can work. So here are some of the positives that I found with the film. Performances are fine, but the ones that do stand out the most are Mckenna, Paul Rudd, and Logan Kim, who is one of the supporting characters in the film. Mckenna is exciting to watch as Phoebe. Her mannerisms and humor are a delight to watch. Seeing her be kind of our guide throughout this movie is exciting and just fun to watch, especially since that this is a younger character. And Mckenna just has so much great delivery, great timing, that I am surprised on how much a kid character can be so endearing to watch because of her. Because of her, it's so much entertaining to see a character like this, who can be a good inspiration for younger girls to get into science, be the focal point of this movie. Paul Rudd is hilarious as Mr. Grobison. Rudd just brings his charm and likability to him. I don't know how anybody who can say that they don't like Paul Rudd. I don't know anybody. If somebody were to tell me that they didn't like Paul Rudd, I would look at them and be like, what's wrong? Because Paul Rudd just has instant likability factor whenever he's in a movie. There's nothing that I've ever seen him in that I just absolutely hate him in, or just thought that he was just miscast. He has always been a delight. He's always been enjoyable. And so for him to be in the Ghostbusters franchise in this movie, it's awesome. He's amazing. Logan Kim, one of the supporting characters in the film who plays Podcast, Phoebe's classmate, also entertaining. He brings energy and lovability to this kid. He kind of reminds me on how most middle schoolers would act when we were all young. You know, seeing this kid kind of just be kind of kooky and kind of, you know, crazy in a way, but also just very endearing. Same way as Mckenna is. You know, he's very much likable in this movie. Both Grace, Rudd, and Kim are fun together to watch. They have great chemistry. all three of them. Whether it be just Rudd and Grace, Rudd and Kim and Grace, or all three of them together, they work. They work to this movie, and they are easily the best performances in the movie. Both Coon and Wolfhard are fine, but we'll get to them in a little bit. They're not terrible, but they're nothing like extraordinarily amazing. And I don't know if it's just because of what they were given, but they aren't terrible at all. They're fine. But character-wise, we'll get to. As for the original cast, with the screen time that they are given, they still got it. I mean, after 30 years, these guys, both Murray, Aykroyd, Hudson, Potts, they all have it. They still have that same level of energy that they did with the original two Ghostbusters films. And it's just so nice to see them be integrated into the movie in some way that was fun to watch. The direction is stellar. Director Jason Reitman creates more of a coming-of-age film than just making another Ghostbusters movie. He also does a great job of honoring his father's legacy when the Ghostbusters stuff comes into play. When the movie was coming out, Jason Reitman had said that his dad was always on set. He was always watching what his son was doing, what he was making, and to see how much this was kind of like a father-son project together was just, I don't know, there's something about it that feels so sweet and very endearing that it's just nice to see, in a way, Jason Reitman still honoring his father's legacy, not just with Ghostbusters, but you can clearly tell that he truly loves his father. He really loves his dad with how much he has impacted him as a filmmaker. And it was just great to see on how well he was able to handle certain aspects of this movie with some nostalgia parts, but the other parts we'll get to later. But the way he just directs all the actors, especially Grace and Kim, is just it's amazing. It's really awesome to see. The cinematography is amazing. Cinematographer Eric Steelberg captures a different look than we've ever seen in the franchise. Compared to the other movies, this does feel in a way unique. From the gorgeous looking view of Oklahoma to the scenes in Egon's lab, it all looks stunning. And I'm glad that this movie does feel unique to the point of it feels very different with how you tackle a Ghostbusters film. And just the way Spielberg just follows along with the intimate moments with two characters, especially Grace and Kim, or anybody else, the scenery itself, he does an amazing job with that. Production is incredible. Every prop and set looks fantastic, from the proton packs, Egon's lab, the Ecto-1, and Ivo Shandor's mine layer. It's fantastic. The amount of work and detail that went into making sure that this does feel like a legacy sequel is amazing. It shows a lot of dedication that was put into this. A lot of heart and love went into caring for this movie and the franchise as a whole. The visual effects are well done. The ghosts look amazing due to the effects to make them, as well as to make the proton pack streams. Also, having some practical effects for the pterodactyls is a bonus for me. The fact that they are still able to keep some of the practical elements to that movie while also making sure that the visual effects look stunning on the ghosts is what I'm happy to report. Because if this had looked terrible with regards to its visuals, it would look messy. It would look dated. Kind of like what I said about Ghostbusters 2 with its effects kind of dating. This one, I could see it kind of dating a bit, but for the most part, I think it could kind of live up to what the original Ghostbusters movie was, in that it could still hold up very nicely many years probably down the line. So I'm happy to see that at the very least the visuals are there. The music is outstanding. Composer Rob Simonson captures Elmer Bernstein's notes very well while adding his own spin on it, especially the chase sequence. There's a chase sequence with the Ecto-1 with the kids chasing down a ghost through the town of Somerville. Not only is this chase sequence amazing, just the score for it is also incredible. Easily one of the best chase sequences, not only in recent memory, very fun and very creative, but the music to that adds to it. The story is enjoyable. It doesn't feel like a regular Ghostbusters story. Most of the film feels like, in a way, in the direction, like a coming-of-age story. Finding your place, being sort of an outcast, you don't have a lot of friends, you can show your true passion and love, and you can make new friends along the way. A good message to have in today's world. Though the third act, I will say, is something to discuss, and we'll be getting into that. Most of the story was well, especially paying respects to Harold Ramis and the franchise. Because, of course, this movie has to deal with Egon. And a lot of people were wondering how they were going to handle it, and I thought they handled it very well. Especially near the end, as much as I know so many people could probably have their issues with it, I think it was being very respectful and being very loving to not just Egon the character, but Harold Ramis as a whole, and what his importance was to this franchise. And it really shows. It really does show. There's a lot of heart to it, man. As much as this film did some things right for me, they did fell short on some things. So now here are some of the negatives that I can give. The third act just feels like a retread of the original film's ending. It's just the only difference is that it's not in an apartment complex. It's in Oklahoma. It's in Somerville. It's on Ego's farm. That's the only difference. But most of the story I credit for doing something different. I can't say the same for this act that just does the original film's ending. Also, bringing back Gozer as the villain just feels like a lazy way of having the villain. Usually with newer movies, you want to try to, at the very least, like, you can echo some things of the past, but you can't just to the point of redo the ending and or have the same villain just be there. You can't do that. And so that was just the disappointing part of it, is that I wish they had done something a little bit different with regards to a different villain and just how the third act was, because it just really screamed Ghostbusters 1984 ending. The nostalgia, for the most part, I will say is a bit too much. There are some moments where the nostalgia in the film would work. And it does. Stuff with Harold Ramis and even trying to reintroduce people to the proton packs and whatnot, the Ghostbusters stuff, that's fine. It's with, by that third act, it just becomes an overload, because not only do you have Gozer, you have the Terror Dogs, you also have the mini Stay Puft Marshmallow Men creatures. It just becomes to a point of, they just kind of threw everything in by the end of the movie, that it just becomes overwhelming. Where you're like, okay, I know it's just being now the third act of the original film, and that's kind of the down side to it, in that I wish it had not the ending of the movie with so much of the nostalgia thrown into it, because it very much sticks out like a sore thumb. I also do think that the characters, as much as they are performed fine enough, with the exception of both Grace, Rudd, and Kim, their characters do feel like copy versions of the original characters. I mean, Trevor, who Finn Wolfhard plays, like I said, he's not terrible, but the problem is he's pretty much just another Peter Venkman. He really is. Carrie Coon is just Dan Barrett in a way. Even Lucky, who is another kid that Finn Wolfhard friends in the movie, who becomes part of the Ghostbusters, she becomes in a way a combination of Dana and Winston. Mr. Grobison is kind of in a way like Louis Tully, except not as incompetent, but in a way kind of feels like it. Or Podcast, just pretty much Ray Stantz. He's the kid that kind of comes up with all the conspiracy theories and whatnot. That's kind of similar to what Ray did. Even Phoebe, who Grace plays very well, she does start to kind of feel too much like Egon by the end, where, okay, I get it. You're trying to be respectful and you're trying to have characters that do echo the original. But it comes to a point of how much is too much and how much are you just relying on them kind of feeling like copycats of other characters. That's the biggest problem for me, is that characters should stand out on their own, but echo some ways of the originals, but not to the point of it's to a T. Aside from that, it's a good start for bringing back the original series. The original members, because if it had not done out well, I don't know where they would take this. I enjoy the film throughout. Director Jason Reitman mostly honors his father and Ramis' legacy, and I can at least be happy with that. He at least respects the legacy of these two important members of the Ghostbusters family that you would want. I'm going to give Ghostbusters-Afterlife a 7 out of 10. I think it's enjoyable. I think it is a fun watch. It definitely is better than 2. Nowhere close to 1, but at the very least, it's somewhere in between where you can still at least enjoy it. Finally, soon, my review for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and then soon we'll get into the legendary Monsterverse films and be done with the March movies. And then April should not be too bad. We can get through those very quickly. So yeah, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.